So, hi, and welcome to today's podcast. And I have the amazing, my friend, the best-selling author, the crazy man, who is Mr. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? It's Chris McDougall.
Yeah.
Hey, morning, Chris.
Morning, Jules.
You're in Hawaii right now, yes?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Okay, and you can neither confirm
Interrogation.
nor deny that
Yeah.
you used to be based in Pennsylvania.
You're one of the very few people that actually know that intimately. You were like out there in the muck of Peach Bottom, Pennsylvania. And honestly, I feel like I can count on two hands the total number of people that visited us there in 20 years.
Oh, I
People,
loved it there. I mean, they're lost. They're like your basement setup was a perfect world for me to be in. However long I was in that world of an amazing library, there was a hot tub, you had your own kind of homestead farm. I mean, goats, obviously Sherman, who then became very well known. But walk me through the animals you had.
but yeah, you radiated contentment. You radiated potential squatter. Like,
Oh
are we going
yeah.
to at some point, take action?
I mean, I was on the edge of having mail, redirected there. I think that's fair to say.
Which would have been what the heck? Sorry, I have like a dodgy little cord here. Yeah, so the animal, what happened was we started off, neither Mika nor I were farm people. I grew up just outside of Philadelphia. She grew up in Hawaii, around Honolulu. So we were basically city folk. And it all just started gradually. We took in one stray cat, then another stray cat, then chickens, then sheep and goats, and then donkeys and geese, and basically whatever kind of strayed in our direction that we liked, we kept.
And I love it. And so, um, do you remember when we first met in person?
So I'm assuming it was in London at Parkour Generations with Shirley Darlington's afternoon or evening all girl crew. It was in that zone, right?
No, years before.
Really?
Yeah. So back in the Born to Run extravaganza, I had sent you, I was a fangirl of you and the book. Because like many people who read the book, it touched me. It touched my heart really deeply. And I don't even know, I think like a few of the parkour people in London at the time were talking about the book. And there was also a Bulgarian barefoot guy who was kind of semi-homeless and like training a lot with us at the time. And he was talking about the book. And then Thomas Quidic was talking about the book. And so I got the book. And then at the same moment, my uncle, my dearly, dearly beloved uncle, who had dementia at the time, fell down the stairs and broke his neck in the care home he was in. Very unfortunate. And I was spending long hours in the hospital. And my dad, his brother, could not have been further away. He was in New Zealand, like literally could not have been further away in the world. So I took the reins of going and visiting Uncle Carl and staying in the hospital and doing the hours and navigating this. And when I wasn't at the hospital, I was running on Dartmoor and reading Born to Run. And it touched me in a way that I wasn't running for me. I was running for Uncle Carl. And it was this kind of human story. And that kind of links to a lot of what has now become Born to Run 2 are these human stories, which it's always been of these adventures and these things. So I wrote you a fan message, and I think it was on your blog. These are in the days of blogs. And because I was also trying to write my parkour PhD, and your book was this like, oh, this is the kind of book I want to write. I don't want to write a PhD. I don't want to be academic and have to be objective. I want to like exude the passion that I have for this subject and embed it in research. So had you ever read a book like Born to Run before you read Born to Run, before you wrote Born to Run?
Yes, but it probably was not nonfiction. It was probably fiction. If it was nonfiction, I could think of a couple of books that I really liked that were nonfiction. But let me listen. So the fact that I don't recall our first face-to-face meeting, I think proves my theory that my brain is like one of those old cassette tapes, and that I just constantly re-record on top of the same cassette. So I got like 90 minutes of brain. And at the end of those 90 minutes, I got to erase the whole thing and start over again. And so I really like hearing when I talk to people and they go, remember that thing we did? And I'm like, I have zero memory. And then they tell me, like, that's fascinating. I get to watch the movie of my life because I've completely forgotten it. And yet, it's totally believable. I just don't remember it at all. And so when you asked me if I had read a book that was similar in tone and like verve to Born to Run, nothing comes to mind. But recently I've been reading this mystery series of books by this writer named Sarah Gran. And I've become just really fixated on the way she writes, because it's the usual kind of mystery thing with the private investigator detective at the center, but this investigator is just like getting high and like fucking crashing her car and sleeping in, or deciding she's not going to work for 3 days, and then drags her back to the job. And it's not like she is like a slacker or a bum. It's just she's normal. She's absolutely normal and leading a normal life, and yet also solving these mysteries. And that to me is kind of like what I wanted to get in Born to Run, because what I saw was I never really liked reading about running. I was actually writing for Runner's World, and I would never read a full issue of Runner's World because it was just so tedious, the same story over and over in the same tone, which was that running basically sucks, but we just got to do it. And here's how you can do it and make it as as pleasant as possible, even though the fact that it inherently sucks. And I'm like, that's not my experience at all. And if it was everyone else's experience, nobody would run. Like, no one's going to force themselves to do it. So I can't think of a concrete nonfiction book that I read where the people doing the thing really seem to enjoy the thing. And that's what I wanted to do. A sense of adventure, fun, like, this is the best.
Definitely. And so the time we did meet was you were doing a talk. It was the Born to Run book tour in London. And so I'd messaged you and been like, oh, my name's Julian Parkour, new book. And eventually the message got through to you and you said, like, I'm going to be in London. This sounds great. Please come to the book talk. And I did. And it was in a packed out hall, and, everyone was kind of exuberant, and this will to kind of go like, shoes are shit, and we love barefoot, and like, isn't this what the the Irish fell runners have been doing, and this is this, and there was just this good feeling around it, and everyone kind of having empathy with this story of the good bits of the struggle and the ups and the downs, and it's just an adventure. And I don't know, like, you've mentioned it in some of your books, but not everyone knows your writing background with AP either. Like, you've been in adventures, you've been in conflict zones, you've been in that, and you've been the storyteller. So, and I also know from being on a book tour with you, like, you're a warrior. You're adaptive, you're resilient. You'll get up at 4 a.m. and join the 5 a.m. club to go and do a run, and then 2 hours later, and then go straight to a radio interview, and then do something else after having only slept 4 hours because we were driving 200 miles the day before. So you're not a kind of like, just sit in the armchair, think about a book by the fireside. you're an out there adventure person.
I think that's why I gravitate toward people like you and Dan Edwards and Tara Wood and the rest, because I think it's a combination of a couple of things. Number one is we all feel really lucky that we're getting away with this.
God,
Like
yeah. God, yeah.
we're
Yeah.
getting away
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fact that, you're living on your dock in Carlsbad with your wicked cool dog. You can literally walk out your door and drop into the water whenever you want. You can drop into the Pacific whenever you feel like it.
No
I'm
complaints.
sure you wake up and go, oh my God, right? They haven't kicked me out yet. And that's what it was like for me. So, I'd worked as a foreign correspondent for the Associated Press for a bunch of years, and that was constantly like on the move. You do a story about politics and a story about Portuguese soccer, and then a story about a crime and a theft and the economy. It's 7 or 8 articles a day on 7 or 8 completely different subjects, and you're on the move. And then when you go into conflict zones, it's the same thing. You don't decide, well, you know what, not feeling it today, fellas. Let me know how the war turned out. I'll be here. No, you're out there. You got to move, and you kind of feed on that. The fact that the job depends on you getting up and doing it when you don't want to do it. And even though it's kind of unpleasant, at the same time, in the back of your mind, it's self-esteem boosting, because you're telling yourself, you know what? Everybody else is having brunch, not this guy, which is complete. You got to feed your ego a little bit. So in the back of your mind, you think, well, I'm just doing my job. But in the back of your mind, like, you know what? Nobody does it like me. But then when I got into magazine freelancing, I left the Associated Press, got into magazine freelancing, and it was pitch or die. You had to have 6 or 7 different proposals out to different magazines, and you don't know if one will be accepted or 2 or all 6, and all 6 are accepted. And now you've promised yourself to 6 different magazines, 6 different deadlines, all on basically the same day. So, and your livelihood depends on this juggling of chainsaws. You got to keep these things going. And then coming into book publishing, then you make the transition from a guy who's hustling a magazine story a week or 2 weeks, and then suddenly they offer you a book contract and you're financed for 2 years to do one thing, which just seems,
it's wild.
So opulent.
It's wild.
Wait, you're gonna give me money and then you're not gonna want any for 2 years? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
I would never do this. I would never do anything. A writer of all people.
Yeah, like, do you know me?
Yeah.
Do you know how easily distracted I am?
You know the genre. We're writers. We don't do anything until we have to, and then it's going to be late. But then, so you get this opportunity, and you write this book, and then every single day of that first Born to Run book tour, I assume was going to be the last day. Every event, I couldn't believe people were turning up. I was so grateful, and that hasn't left me to this day. If somebody is willing to show up, and then a lot of times people are not willing to show up. You have an event booked, and you show up like, huh? Those things, me and a friend and the friend's friend, and that's it.
Yeah, and you work your ass off. I've seen that. Like, you work your ass off, and this kind of deep gratitude and your kind of work ethic is really admirable. So how did you promote Born to Run? Because initially, now, how many years is it since Born to Run came out?
It came out in 2009, so we're coming in like 13 or so years now, whatever that is.
Yeah. 14 years. And it's known. It set the scene. It was a game changer amongst books. It's been, it's done very well. And to this day, you'll still see, like, it'll be in the background of a TV series or something. It'll be there. Like, it continues to have its moment because people continue to want to move, I think. And, we all find our things at different times. And now this thing exists. But at the time, it seemed not so obvious to a lot of people in the publishing world that this book was going to have a really good groove. So can you talk a little bit about just that trajectory and story that you went through with that?
It's still kind of a black box to me too, because when it started to do well, I assumed it was all because of me. Like, I figured it out. I'm the best promoter. And then I look back on it now 3 books later and realize, no, I had no idea what I was doing and still don't. I don't understand. Even now we have Born to Run 2 out, and things which should have been obvious, I realized I've never done or knew but forgot. Like here's a simple thing. I also keep forgetting that the first people who like to weigh in on Amazon reviews are the kind of know-it-alls that just want to rush in and show that they know more than you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, so the book will come out January 1st, and by January 3rd, you'll have 10 reviews. I'm like, how the shit did you even get the book already?
Yeah.
Read it to the end and have a well-informed opinion. But it's like, 1 star, I disagree with blah, 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 blah. And now,
Read, write, review. Boom.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more like learn about the book, disagree with the fact that somebody is saying that they know more than you, make that known. So now, like, I'm going through this process again, and Born to Run 2 has been out for literally 1 month, almost to the day. And I'm looking at the Amazon reviews like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell fellow travelers and friends, please weigh in, because otherwise you get swamped by the guys that just want to, who are offended that anybody is willing to say that they know something different than them. But your original question was, so how about promoting it? So it was kind of weird. I assumed that Born to Run would have the shelf life of basically like yogurt, that it would be like 2 or 3 weeks, and then it was starting to stink, and then people would just forget about it and get it off the shelf. And I went out on my own, basically. I started to go to places where I knew runners would be gathering. And that's one advantage that I think a lot of people in life in general overlook, even in social media, that you want people to come to you. Why aren't people coming to me? How can I attract people to me? But the answer is no, go to where they are. Don't make them come to you. And that was one thing I kind of stumbled on, luckily early on with Born to Run. So Born to Run came out, it was ignored. It was like never reviewed. I could never get on TV or radio, nothing. It just came out. And a couple of weeks later, it was starting to disappear. So I started to go to local fun runs and races. I knew about a couple local running clubs. I knew a couple people. I'd say, hey guys, I wrote this book. Do you mind if I just show up, talk for 10 minutes, books in the trunk, buy them, don't buy them. I just want to give you a thumbnail what's going on. And since this is in their general interest, they're willing to hear me out. And that also teaches you the gift of kind of soft sell salesmanship, where you show up, you talk about it, you talk to people, not at them, and take a couple of questions and then get out of sight. Then whatever they want to do, and then they'll either follow up like the way you did, or it'll germinate for a little while. And that's what I did. So that it came out in May, and by June, July, which was big running season, I was out hitting races, running clubs, cross country teams. And that's when it started to gather a bit of a word of mouth momentum. And that's what really started to make it move.
And so your other books, so we have, give me the right chronology here. So Born to Run.
Yeah, the Natural
Born Heroes.
Then Running
with Sherman. And now Born to Run 2.
Run 2, yeah.
And the kind of, what are the common threads that you see between all of them? Because I have some ideas of what as the reader, but I don't know what you're for you.
I want to hear yours. I bet yours are more interesting than mine.
Well, I'll go first then. So for me, it's they're all really heart-centered projects. They're about a bigger why than anything else. Like at the time I read Born to Run, I wasn't particularly interested in running. Like I was the classic teenage girl who did a lot of athletics and netball and stuff like that, hit 16, stopped doing sports, went to art college, parties, woo! Then like fell back in love with movement age 35. And then I had my kind of parkour story. And when you're around people who move a lot, it kind of makes you want to move, but you don't really know how, and you're not sure, and you don't know who to trust to hold your hand to take you on that journey. So you had the hidden running tribe of Born to Run against the mainstream narrative of like, kind of suck it up, put your big shoes on, and off you go. And then, the wartime resistance, this this unlikely band of renegades, from the academics to the Cretan shepherds, who, again, there's just this element of human spirit that comes through. And then, you know, Sherman, I met Sherman. I'm so honored that, you know, just the timing of the universe meant I came to stay in Peach Bottom twice, and you were just beginning to work with Sherman. And I have, you know, photos of you and Sherman in like the ultimate standoff in the lane. And where, you know, like one day it was a good day with Sherman. Like he wanted to walk and run. And other days he was just like, no, not happening, not the day. And then meeting Tanya, who came and helped with Flower, and who's a giant donkey, or what do you call it? The giant donkey, big donkey. She was a different type of donkey.
Mammoth. Are they mammoths? God, the vocabulary has slipped my mind. There's mini, regulars, and mammoths.
Yeah. So a very larger donkey compared to what Sherman was. And then just seeing this transition and seeing how, like, if Sophie was on her scooter or her bike in front of Sherman, that then he would trot and you were trotting next to him with like a stick and a carrier bag. And Tanya was riding her donkey and I was on an Amish scooter trying to take photographs at the same time. All these really, like, you just couldn't make this shit up, kind of like wild environments, which I love. I like adventures. So, but just this, it's really heartfelt. These heartfelt stories that happen to be about movements and environments that people are in, and life circumstances that people are in. And there's a kind of thread of like peace and social justice embedded to that, because we all have a body. Like, I mean, you know, growing up in England, there was always a joke like, well, does, you know, yeah, but does the Queen fart? It was always like, well, she does. So, you know, however improper you behaved at some event or anything, it would always be like, yeah, well, you know,
Queen farts.
Queen farts. Pope probably takes a shit as well, you know. it's that kind of thing. So and then mixing these heartfelt adventures with creativity, with risk, you know, kind of defying the mainstream a lot, or just presenting an alternative narrative which isn't heard very often.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's funny because I assumed that after Born to Run came out, it would just get blown away by lots of other books doing the same thing, but better. And by the same thing, meaning showing like the joy, adventure, fun, and camaraderie. And what's been surprising to me is that it sort of hasn't happened. That if you look at most sports or adventure related books, it's the same formula over and over. It's the solitary person facing his or her own personal demons and challenges, and that the challenge may be tough, but in the end, they're tougher. And like, it's just so predictable and boring to me. And I still care. And about, you know, it was, I don't know. So I think one thing that was interesting to me was that one reviewer at one point after, I think it was Natural Born Heroes, made a comment in a review saying that, you know, McDougall clearly loves, you know, the people he's writing about. And that was a revelation to me. I'm like, oh yeah, you're kind of right. I do. I really genuinely like them a lot, and like what they do. And I think that was something that I happened by accident with Born to Run. That I found myself surrounded by people like even Ted, who in the book,
even Ted, who we both love.
Yeah, who I just emailed him recently. We're going to be in a race together in Santa Barbara next month, but even Ted, who at the time was like a piece of like broken glass in my eyeball, like that's how much he irritated me. But there's something about him that I found genuinely super entertaining and wildly weird and fascinating. And so for Born to Run, I just stumbled into a tribe of people that I really was entertained by and liked. And then I think intuitively I've done that ever since, that all the projects I get involved in, I'm drawn toward groups of people that I would really like to hang out with for like the rest of my life and then write about that adventure. So you saw it with running with Sherman. Tanya, the best. You know, I'm running with Nika, our friend Zeke, and the kids and the donkeys. Natural Born Heroes, it was Chris White and Pete White. who took me on those adventures, but also the people that we were writing about or researching from World War II were this band of people that really loved and liked each other and shared fun as much as risk. Even right now, I'm thinking about doing a book on body surfing, and largely because one of the great godfathers, one of the legends of body surfing, is this guy named Mark Cunningham. And I've had a chance to hang out with him, and the guy's a doll. He's a sweetheart, great dude. And then there's this Brazilian body surfing coach named Leticia Paredes, and she and I have been corresponding, and she's just a fireball. She's just like human sunshine. And I thought, it's not a bad way to spend 2 years of your life, like hanging out with a guy named Mark Cunningham, and then this, Brazilian human sunshine beam coaching me from a distance. Like that's pretty good. And then hopefully it translates into a book that people feel like they're sharing the joy.
I mean, definitely. I mean, that really comes across, and it is that sense of, like, I find it really hard to finish a book, and I eke it out because I really miss the characters when I don't get time to spend with them anymore. Like it's painful, emotionally painful to me. And then I go on YouTube and I search out all the clips of them because I want to spend more time with them, because this connection has been created, and they are really interesting people doing interesting things. And I think if you're people of a curious mind, or kind of growth mindset, or however you want to label it, it's like, oh, I just love things that are like, oh, fascinating, or like, oh, interesting. And when it's like interesting, positive, good vibe, insights, learn, like real stuff that you can be like, oh, how can I be more like Ted? How can I have like the energy of Barefoot Ted? How can I, be like Zach? How can I have this, like, whether it's a can do or a physical strength thing, like, and as much as there are these really, admirable, incredible, very inspiring aspects of like, wow, someone can, run that far for this long and that time. Those, I think, because I have a creative ego. I don't have a sporting ego. So anything in the movement world, I'm just like, it's just kind of like, it's self-exploratory. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. Like I did this 1 year handstand project. My friend Damien guided me from like 365 days. You're going to do a free holding handstand. I was like, ooh, okay. It was like, start with 3 1-minute planks a day. I was like, okay, I can start with that and build from there. And we did. And I, at the end of the year, I had a 10-second handstand. And every time I was there, and it's like time travel, because the seconds in a handstand, it's like when you're surfing, those seconds on the board on a green wave that's glassy and amazing, that's time travel. This is not like, oh, cup of tea, what's the time? Yeah. This is not the same experience of time. So when you're in these kind of time travel moments and you do something, it's like, oh, that was interesting. And I feel like that when you write about these movement worlds and people in these movement worlds. And I personally find it really difficult to put words around movement. And so was that something that came easy to you as a wordsmith and a writer? Because you embodied the movement. Like if you weren't running, could you have written about running?
So
there was a lot there, sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot of really important stuff. And let me work backwards so I don't forget. Number one is movement does not translate well to language at all. If I tell you to scratch your nose, you can do it one of 1,000 different ways. Quickly, slowly, front of the nose, side of the nose, both hands, one hand. All I said was scratch your nose, which to me seems obvious. Well, scratch your nose, scratch your nose. But you're hearing it and you're imagining whatever it is you're imagining. And so what I think worked well was I do a lot of description of people and them and their emotions and less about what they're physically doing. Mm-hmm. I'm not telling you really how Barefoot Ted is placing his foot on the ground, but I'm describing Ted as being head up, shoulders back, chest out all the time, looking for adventure, pitter pattering along. And I think you get a sense of not what he's doing, but what this kind of guy or this kind of person would do. And so with like Jen Shelton too, once you get a sense of what Jen is, she was like a 17-pound rugby player, hard drinker who would like wake up in people's gardens by the police and send them on, who would like, fight her boyfriends with her fists. That's all you need to know. Like you can figure
It's
out.
like, okay, this is a starting point.
Right.
That can anchor me. Yeah.
Yeah. So this girl in a race, you don't have to tell me how she runs. I'm going to figure it out, So I think that to me was something I think I learned from news writing, that you really can't describe. And also people, it gets confusing because you're actually taking them out of the story and into their own speculation about what a movement looks like. You've taken them out of the story and into a sort of diagrammatic panel of engineering motions. So you ignore that, give them a sense of the character, and they'll figure out what the movement is from there. Here's an example too. So remember when we were in that bookstore, here's some in-house stuff, in the bookstore in Brooklyn with Dan Edwards, and it was a piano.
Yes.
And we asked Dan, Parkour Generations, Dan, to improvise some movement flow on a piano in a crowded bookstore on a rainy day in Brooklyn.
And there were cats.
And of course there were cats. We had to pause everything, make sure we bring in some more cats. Perfect. We have maximum cats. And what he did, I can never describe it, but once you get a sense of who Dan is, that there's a massive quiet brain churning away and a sense of like quiet observation and joy. That's all you need to know. And then you realize whatever he's going to do is going to be friggin' amazing and unforeseeable. And so that's what happens with movement and the page. Focus on the person. Don't focus on the play-by-play of what they're doing. And then the reader will be able to fill in the blank and imagine it. But something you said earlier really triggered an insight that I haven't had before, which is I think that when you like somebody, you are way more receptive to learning from them. And I think the thing you were talking about is when you're in this world where you're reading about someone and you feel a sympathetic bond with them, to me, that's a much more effective vehicle for passing along information, because I think your guard is lowered. You're not wondering, hey, what are they up to? Or why are they preaching to me? Or you're coming on too strong. You've just removed that barrier and you see yourself in them. And then whatever it is that they're doing, I think you're more inclined to take it on board. And so I think maybe that's another reason why Born to Run really landed with people, because they really like Jen, love Billy, Barefoot Ted and Kabaya were kind of weird, but you kind of sort of see that they're living their own best life. And I think that's a good way. Maybe that's the reason why the whole Barefoot movement started to gather momentum in the wake of that book, was because people felt not threatened by this challenge to the orthodoxy of conventional running shoes.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't do well with someone trying to impart information on me. Number one, if they shout, like if there's kind of like an angry presentation of the information, even if it's the best information ever, I'm just like, there's an internal, just fuck off. just nope. Like don't receive. And even like the curiosity and the fascination, and also this thing, I think, where there's a kind of moral ambiguity around some people as well, of like, the imperfections that we all have and the flaws we all have. And when we see them shared in a very compassionate, empathic way, it's like, yeah, we should all just kind of give ourselves a bit of a break sometimes. And then look what happens as a result with all these kind of cool things. So, yeah, bookstores in Brooklyn with cats and pianos were really, really cool. I still have the photos. They were really cool. And so our forays and melting and meeting points were you coming from writing about running, which is a type of movement, and me having this deep immersion into the parkour world. us both being having kind of storytelling backgrounds. So me from documentary, ending up doing a PhD, really not knowing what I was getting myself into. You being a journalist, then getting a book deal. And then our worlds collided and molded. And what I saw and still see is loads of movement people hate running, which may sound really weird. And then loads of runners don't move very well, even though they run well. What do you think about that?
Isn't it funny that that continental divide exists, even though they're both doing the thing they say
Same, but different.
But I got to back you up one more time too. I was just remembering that bookstore again. You know who I just remember was there too? Was Liz Mealy.
Oh, it broke out then? Sorry, what did you say? Who was there?
Yeah. Liz Mealy. Remember the stand-up?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember because there was a little video clip of Dan's performance, and the voice you hear the loudest is Liz, just like laughing and shouting and just overcome with delight. And it's funny, as you were describing the scene, it suddenly dawned on me, like parts of the memory like start to fill themselves, and I sort of forgot everybody who was there. I remember, like, you and Tara and Dan, but
Liz
and Adam were there. Oh yeah, and Liz.
Yeah.
What I think probably delighted Liz more than anybody else is, like, that's her job, like, to improvise in front of an audience and show them something that they were not expecting. And so she's watching Dan do that with his body. It's what she does with her mouth and mind. And she probably looked at him and go, "Oh yeah, dude." Like,
she's like, I get it.
Respect.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of circle back segues in this.
We could just do a whole like memory lane book tour, random adventures, life in Peach Bottom.
Yeah,
discussion.
Absolutely. But you bring up a really interesting point, which it's funny. So I assumed that with Born to Run, Natural Born Heroes, like, those divisions would be, would disappear, in particular with Natural Born Heroes. But to this day, yeah, you're right. Parkour people don't like to run. Runners don't like to do movement. And I think the reason why is that they don't understand what it is they're being asked to do. And I mean, let's put it this way. The problem is, if you're a parkour person, the way running has been presented to you is London Marathon. It's people huffing along with the same repetitive, predictable motion over and over again for hours. And you're a parkour person, like, dude, I don't move the same
so boring.
2 seconds simultaneously. Every movement I make is improvised. It's refined, but it is improvised and it's varied. And I'm not just going to huff along to the same thing for 4 hours. And so the way they perceive running is a horrible perception of running. And then when you ask runners about movement, they think, oh, it's yoga. Oh, it's that boring stretching shit that I'm being asked to do.
Yeah, it's like, oh God, all that breathing fucking noise just stresses me out.
Yeah. And stress positions, I don't like it. It's painful. It's boring. And if the two sides could see, no, we're not asking you to do either of those things. Parkour people, you are running, dude. There's no way you're getting up that wall from a static jump. You were running, and you were sprinting. And you come off of a jump, you're running and moving your legs and arms. You're basically sequencing your body in a running motion. And for runners, we're not asking you to stand there holding your ankle pulled up behind your ass. We're asking you to, like, do bear crawls and jumps, things like that, that when you start to run, you're going to feel like you're totally activated and your entire chain has now been loosened. And so that's the Mideast peace talks that we need to continue, which to tell the two sides what you've been presenting in the past is wrong, and what is true will make you feel fantastic.
I mean, yeah, like I definitely needed like the United Nations of movement as an intervention for my running. So when I started parkour, like the outside classes, we'd meet at the tube station, and then you generally like run somewhere. And I loved the spots where I knew like it was literally just run across the road. But some of them, or then you'd run across the road and then you'd like do a warm up and you train, and then you'd run to another spot. And the running would kill me. And I remember, it would be like a 5 to 10 minute run. And I had all these kind of like tactics. I would like stop and tie up my shoelaces. And I remember like Johan Vigru like going like, oh, shoelaces again. Hey, Julie. And I'd be like, yep. It was like, you could kind of see everyone's bullshit playing out and coping strategies. And I used to like get exasperated because I was also like I was one of the only women for a long time. I was really shit at it. And after the like 5 to 10 minutes of running, whereas, everyone had kind of started to do their next thing, and this is being led by a coach. And I'd just be like, for God's sake, like, how do you expect me to do that when you've just made me do that? Like, if I could have had a nice walk here, then I could think about vaulting that wall. But I've just died fighting the street with every single step. Now I'm out of breath, angry, I'm pissed off, and I feel really shit and not confident about what you're going to ask me to do next.
Yes.
So, and then someone taught me how to run. And I was like, oh, you don't fight the street. Oh, all this like tick, 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 high cut, like, shit, wow, I have energy. My legs don't hurt. My ankles don't hurt. My Achilles don't hurt. Like, this is like, wow. And then you start to see all these street fighters, stroke runners, who are just out there like street fight running, like street run fight run club street. I don't know what to describe it, but it's just this like, I don't think you're really in sync with the environment. Like, so this kind of body mechanics relationship. And I remember the first time like going to Elephant and Castle, and there was a 10-minute run. And I remember finishing that and arriving at the spot and just being like, I'm good. Couldn't run fast, but I could arrive and then move.
Weren't you smoking a cigarette the whole time too?
Yeah. Not me. I was just like, but it was just like, wow, such a fundamental thing that I think people take it for granted that because you can do something means you're doing it well, and that you're doing it in a way that's not going to hurt or injure yourself or set you back.
I think we've set the opposite message, that if it feels good, you're doing it wrong. If you're comfortable, you're not trying hard enough. And exactly, right? So you asked me at the beginning, I think prior to this conversation, I was mentioning I was on a trail run yesterday and kind of went a little, overdid it a little bit, went too far. And you said, how far was it? I'm not really sure. I'm like, well, how do you measure how far you're going to run? I'm like, I got no tech. I don't really know. I just kind of go by feel. And almost always I miscalculate by about 30 minutes, like,
that's a big amount of time.
Well, of those 30 minutes, 29 of them are walking.
Okay.
Or so I got into outrigger paddling a lot. And so I'll take the canoe out, I'll be out there, like, oh, look at that. Like, it's easy to figure out how enticing it is to head out. And then you turn around and go, oh, yeah, lands that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, you overshot by a good 30. And then those last 30 minutes are quiet, slow, solitary regret, and vow to never make that mistake again until tomorrow. But that's the cool thing about it, though, is I don't grind it out. I don't like grit my teeth and go, I'm going to come in as hard as I can. I get this like I'm walking for 30 minutes. Or I did this run last week, this trail run, and I thought sunset was at 7. It turns out it was actually at 6. So as I'm entering the trail, at about 5:45, I'm like, must be kind of cloudy. It's kind of darker than I expected. Wasn't the clouds, it was the lack of sun. And so next thing I know, I'm on this trail. Once you're on the trail, you're on. Like, there's no way off. You're committed to this thing. And I'm doing this trail high on the mountain in pitch blackness. And I realized by the time I stumble off this thing, I'm going to be in no mood to run the road home. So I called my wife. I called Mika, said, hey, can you pick me up at the trailhead? And so she sat there in the car waiting for me to come tumbling off a cliff. But that was basically it. I was not committed or wedded to any kind of accomplishment or goal or external. It was just that whatever that adventure brought me for that moment. And if it meant getting a ride home or walking home, so be it. Come back to enjoyed another day.
And I think that's like, I see a lot of people who they prepare themselves for these kind of one-off big adventures. And there's huge value to that, to test your limits and see who you are. And yet I always feel like, well, what about the micro adventures? What about the everyday adventures? Like, do you not have a life full of adventures? So it's like the people who can, maybe they'll go to Burning Man and be really creative for 5 days. And the rest of the year, they're maybe dull as mud. Who knows? I don't know. But I'm like, well, why don't you just have a creative life? Or, why don't you have an adventurous life? Why don't you have a movement-filled life? Because then when you have this continuity of movement and adventure and creativity and risk, you then kind of flex the muscle for that then lends more ease to rejecting the constant no pain, no gain push through, because there's always another adventure.
Well, I want to question this whole notion of test your limits, because the more I think about that, the more I'm not sure I see any benefit to that whatsoever. That's kind of the common rallying cry: test your limits, see what you got. But let's reflect on a guy like Dan. Dan Edwards, does he ever test his limits? To me, he's about craftsmanship. He's constantly refining, dialing in the craft. And so the expansion beyond the limits is almost an after consequence. The fact that, and I'll be inclined to see, I really don't know that many parkour practitioners. I'm like maybe 4 or 5 I can name off the top of my head. But now Shirley strikes me as a test your limits kind of person. And I wonder if it actually benefits her, that I feel like she's always setting like muscle up challenges for herself.
I mean, the woman pulled the bus, like, I don't know, 2 months after she gave birth. So like a crazy strongman thing. I was like, Shirley, you're amazing.
I kind of like that, because in her mind, like, if my baby ever gets trapped under a bus, I'm good.
She's Superwoman. It's fine.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, it's probably unfair of me to even speculate about her, but the impression I get from Shirley is that. But yeah, Chris, her husband, is like a Dan Edwards model of like, hey, I'm just really interested in learning how to play the Stradivarius. I really want to get these strings tuned. And later on, I'm playing a concerto, but that's because I was just refining the craft, and the goal, the thing which is beyond my limits, well, that was happening naturally. I didn't push for it. So that's my concern with so much of what we see in the movement world and in the world in general is about, push through and like grit your teeth and get to the end and summit Everest. And like summiting Mount Everest has now become the paradigm for stupid fucking behavior. It's people who really should not be up there. They're not mountaineers. They're not outdoors people, but they want to be able to go home and tell people, hey, I summited Everest, even though some Sherpa dragged their, pampered up there and down. But if you had spent your time just enjoying the outdoors, enjoying the climbs, spending time in satisfied state on a mountain, and summiting is just something that would have happened anyway.
Yeah, I think it's all in the preparation and the risk assessment and the really honest risk assessment. So I know a lot of parkour people, and they've changed the limits of what we know is humanly possible now, which is just in a really, really short space of time. And I think it's phenomenal. In like 25 years, we have now normalized this idea. Well, not normalized for many, but like, I don't know if you've seen it, or I can send you a clip. So like the Stora Awards. So Stora, this group of lads from Brighton in the UK, they started parkour when they were about, I think, 15 average age. And they're not the kind of gym parkour people. They're on the street, and there's this friendship, and there's this love amongst these friends, which I'm sure they never talk about that, or I don't know if they talk about that or not. But their YouTube channel has 8 million followers, and when I watch them, it's just like they're a group of lads having the time of their lives, and at the same time, they've honed their practice. They've benefited from not being the first generation of trailblazers who take a really long time to experiment and explore. They can now expedite their journey because they're like, well, we know like we need to do that. We know we can, you know, really like have our body armor and bulletproof ourselves and be 360 degrees strong. So they can kind of expedite it. And so they can do stuff which becomes new. But beyond, like, for them to extend their limit is part of a lifetime of movement journey. It's not they're not doing like Red Bull competitions and shit like that. And I'm against that in a very youth dominated kind of lifestyle sports culture. I don't feel that those are good, ambitious goals. And I also think the product is not a health first approach to having longevity in movement either. That's just my personal opinion. So I think like with people like Dan and Chris, it's about, you know, when the day is the day to try the thing that's a new thing. And what you're concerned about is, how am I going to be tomorrow? So you're never doing the new thing at the cost of everything. And I think that's different when you have this kind of movement for life and longevity approach, and you do it for the joy of it. So what I saw through parkour and like all the research was that for some people to find joy in their movement, they kind of love suffering. They love it. And in the same way, like for me, movement's kind of like music. Some people are going to be electric guitar. Some people are going to be drums. Some people are going to be choral singing or a quiet cello or a panpipe. It's like, it's all music. It's all movement. And, you know, I'm introverted. Like a CrossFit gym with loud music and shouty people or something, like it doesn't work for me. It's not my style. It's not for me. For other people, they're like, best day ever.
Right.
I'm like, cool, you do you. But don't tell me I'm wrong for not doing that.
I
Either.
because I like to tell people they're wrong for not agreeing with me. But again,
I'm so diplomatic. I'm not generally.
Yeah. What's wrong with you that you haven't caught up with me yet? So my best friend Craig is also kind of a recreational runner like me. And we like to do races together. We call ourselves actually the three donkeys, the three asses, me, Craig, and Luis. But Craig and Luis like to do the big urban marathons, like, you know, Boston, London, New York. I dread and hate those things. Like, you know, I'm in a corral, literally a fucking livestock corral, and screaming and noise and rock bands. And so in Boston, there's the Boston Marathon. And then there's something called the 26 Point True Marathon, which was created by these two groups, Pioneers and Trailblazers. Trailblazers is a female forward running group like Santa Mujeres, and Pioneers is a people of color running club. And they're basically a brother sister organization in downtown Boston in a sort of a very ethnically diverse part of Boston called Roxbury. So they created their own Boston Marathon. This, you know, the so-called Boston Marathon is not actually in Boston. It's in the affluent suburbs like, you know, Newton and Hopkinton outside of Boston. The real Boston Marathon, the 26 Point True, is in the heart of the city. So the day before the Boston Marathon, they do their own marathon. And they just set up water stations, which is like a card table outside of someone's aunt's house. And they run through the streets of Dorchester and Roxbury. And that to me is like, if I'm going to do a marathon, it's that one. Like, it's awesome. There's going to be like 30 people running down the streets. They're not closing off any traffic. You're dodging cars. You're stopping for red lights. You're getting a cup of Kool-Aid from someone's cousin. Like, that to me is like, that's what running should be. But my friends Craig and Louise feel the exact opposite. And so I just understand that they are just wrong. And like you said, if you find that satisfaction in it, but maybe we got the question is, what's the beating heart of it all? The beating heart of it is that you have found this thing which brings you joy and solidarity and camaraderie, and that you're going to find a way to work toward it where the surpassing your limits is actually more of a victory lap. You know, it's not a venture into the unknown. By that point, you kind of know, and you're there to enjoy the experience, not suffer through it.
And I think, I mean, something that comes through definitely with Born to Run 2 and just from me knowing you, and I think why we get on is that, like, we're big fun fans. Like,
Yeah.
like if it's not fun, there has to be some really interesting other qualities for me to be drawn towards it.
Oh, excuse me, Jules, can you hang on one? Hey,
I think,
Shika, Uber's back. Okay, sorry, we are going through a cat crisis.
oh,
So we have our cat Kitty, named
mhm.
after Sully in Monsters Inc. Um, and then we just brought in a new rescue kitten a couple days ago, and previous cat is sulky and pouty and basically run away from home for
It's a protest.
what?
This house is all about me.
Totally, like what a big baby. And so I was a little concerned because usually I get
Oh,
up around 5 in the morning. He's like there for breakfast. Now it's 9 o'clock. We haven't seen him in 4 hours, so he just came sauntering solemnly. And so I had to alert Mika that he's back.
making his feelings known, just like, I'm not happy about this.
That's right.
Not happy about this
Right.
at all.
Yeah. But fun base, look, Jules, I think it circles back to something we talked about initially about Born to Run, is that I discovered that a way to do a project is to surround yourself with people that you really like, that are funny and surprising and are going to make you happy. Why not move it the same way? Why not every time you do it, like, oh, this is cool, I want to do a little bit more.
I mean, yeah, for me, I always say to clients, like, it feels good to feel good. And I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten this thing of like, well, it does feel good to really feel good, but we don't kind of give value to that. We don't acknowledge that. We want to hear, the badge of honor of like, oh, I did that and I passed out and I puked. And I'm like, that sounds awful. Like, please
Yeah.
don't ever invite me for any of those experiences. Like,
But
why would you do that?
here's the thing too, though, is that hidden in those suffer fests is a lot of joy.
Yeah,
And
true.
there's the obstacle course race, Tough Mudder.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It just sounds, it's mud and it's tough. No, thank you. But I'm actually watching a documentary film that a buddy of mine, Matt Davis, made about the Tough Mudder 100. It's a 100-mile obstacle course.
I know someone who's training for that right now.
Well, tell them to watch this video. I'm sure they probably already have. But what's interesting is there are two women who are vying for the championship in this one. But before the race, you could tell they are so happy. They're like talking shit about each other. Oh, she said that. Well, I'm gonna for, but they're smiling, they're beaming. Like, this is playful and fun. And then what I noticed is that a lot of the obstacles, even though these women are vying to win, they are stopping to help other competitors over the obstacle. And there's one where you're in a water thing and there's like this like rotating thing you got to climb over. And so what the protocol is, once you're over, you stand on the other side and you help pull it so people behind you can get over. And it's just kind of like the law of the land. Like, it's what you do. So even though these two girls are in the middle of a very strenuous, heated battle to beat each other, I think it goes without saying that when they're in the water, they stop and they wait, even though they're separate. You help the other people across and you move on. And I think that's what it's really about. So people go home, oh, it was tough, it was tough. But in their heart, what they remember is the person who helped them over the obstacle. And that they could have climbed the rope, but they stopped and they held it steady for the person who was ahead of them before they went up the rope too. And that's what it's all about. So we put a veneer of like, tough, scabby scar tissue, but really it's something kind of pink and mushy inside that we really like.
It's heart-centered. It's really, like, help your fellow man and leave no one behind. And that was what, one of the women at the Santa Mujeres Thursday night run in Balboa Park, the last time I saw you there, one lady who finished, and I think it's a 5K, or like there's a 1K option you can do, there's a 5K option.
1 mile or 3 mile, yeah.
Yeah. And she said, like, that was the best run ever. And I was like, what's the thing about this night? Like, and she said, leave no one behind. Like, and I always, I wrote about this, and I always said with parkour as well that, it's a culture of effort. And a lot of the times we don't know the stories of that person who turns up. We see them And you can be like, oh, short, tall, fat, thin, strong. There are kind of obvious characteristics that we'll then create a story of, but yet we really never know the story of that. And I think your books really help to kind of give those stories. So for anyone who hasn't purchased the wonderful Born to Run 2, give us a run through. What's in the book?
It's two things. It's an evolution in my mind. This is the one book I've written where two things happened. Number one, I didn't really understand the book until I was in writing it with Eric, Coach Eric Orton, who's my co-author on this. And number two, it actually turned out way better than I anticipated. And so usually those two things are reversed. Number one is I know exactly what I want to do. I know all the steps, beginning, middle, and end. And then I set out to write it. I had this lofty vision and I kind of like settled for, oh, well, that's the best I could do. Like I saw Shangri-La, the shiny gold city on the hill. I ended up with a log cabin. It's about as good as I could do. This was the opposite. I expected to write a very minimalist, hardcore training book. I wanted to lay out the mechanics because what I'd seen from Born to Run is a lot of people were inspired. Like, I want to run. Mm-hmm. Now I want to try it. But I very deliberately did not give any training advice in Born to Run because when I wrote it, I was barely a runner myself. Like I was not going to tell anybody. I felt like the guy in the back of the plane, that anybody land this plane? Like, I'll land it. I'm not a pilot. But if we all walk away from this, that's good enough. But now 13 years later, the thing which Eric promised me, I realized, he really delivered on this promise. And he has this thing he asks new clients when he starts to work with them. He says, hey, if I can give you a magic wand, what kind of a runner would you be? You have all the power, all the magic of movement. What do you want? Do you want an Olympic gold medal? Do you want to be able to run across America? What do you want? And it seems like a very easy question to answer, but it's not. It's a tricky question. If someone says, I give you unlimited power, Julie Angel, what do you want? Well, what do I want?
Horrible question.
Well,
really hard question.
And the famine, Donald Trump to dissolve into a puddle of acid. Yeah, I'd probably stop right there. But it's a difficult question. So when Eric asked me, I'm kind of running through all the options. And then I said, dude, if I could just walk out the door and run as far as I like, whenever I feel like it, that's what I want. And now 13 years later, exactly that. Yesterday I went out for a trail run. I'm like, seems like those hills look pretty good today. I think I'll run that pillbox trail. I'm feeling pretty good. Rather than do it once, I'll do it twice. I was able to improvise on the fly. I miscalculated by about 30 minutes. But the fact was I could walk out my door and literally look around, see which direction looked tasty, decide how far I felt like going, and just went. And the only consequence was I had to walk the last 30 minutes instead of running it. And so that's what I wanted to deliver in a book for everybody else, were the actual training steps you can follow so that you can run anywhere you want, whenever you want, as far as you feel like, and feel like every run is going to be a warm-up for the next one and not like, oh, my Achilles hurts, my back hurts, that was a bad idea, I might get injured, I need new shoes. None of that. Just pure juvenile freedom. But then what the book grew into was this also collection of stories and shared experiences, which took place because we decided to front load with the photos. And you were part of that because you shot the movement stacks training in San Diego. What I wanted for this book was, rather than getting confused about trying to translate movement into language, I wanted photos and a shit ton of them. I want everything to be clear in an image on the page. And I wanted those images to reflect the kind of runners you just don't see in the running industry, which is people that don't look like you, Julie. Sorry, but there have been enough blonde ponytails in the world. It's funny, our friend, Lady Southpaw, who wrote this song for us, Born to Run 2, she has a line in there about like my ponytail swing. And I go, no ponytails. You got to change that lyric.
I'm just not into haircuts.
It's all good, but what I wanted was I wanted the Imans, I wanted the Marcuses, I wanted the Zach Friedleys, I wanted the Karma Parks, I wanted the trans people, the prosthetic running people, the people of color, the Asian people that you just don't see in the running world. I want that on every single page. But by photographing them and then talking to them, you hear these stories. You talk to Zach, and originally he was just an image on a page. I wanted a picture of a guy who could run with his prosthetic. But then you talk to Zach and you realize, well, there's a lot more than a picture here. So his story is in the book. Santa Mujeres, I wanted to learn how they started the club. And then it just blossomed. It's like, wow, Latinas in music clubs, struggling with body image and weight question and feeling like they're all by themselves. And then discovering one person and realizing, oh, actually, if there's two of us, there's probably 200 of us. And then creating this club and making their own personal experience the motto. Like, I felt alone, I'm not going to have anybody else feel alone. So that's what the book grew into, a combination of very systematic how to train in a way where you can run happily the rest of your life, but also here's other people that discovered it on their own.
I think, yeah. And I mean, I love it. I think it's really powerful. And it comes back to the old adage of, once you see it, it's easier to be it. And it can confirm. And like, I've seen, every variation of body shape that in no way defines how someone can move.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of reductionist to think that there's this one body type that is going to mean A, B, C, D. And like, I got really upset by actually a very well-known running coach who at the Vivo Barefoot store in London, they had these amazing photographs of skeletons in like different positions. There was like a deep squat and something. And I was there with a friend and I said, and at the time, like I couldn't hold a deep squat. And I said, oh, I can't do that. That's really painful for me. And without any invitation to comment, the guy just said, well, you'll never run pain-free. And my internal
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, and my internal will go fuck yourself, like was internally said. And I was like, oh, well, actually I do. I do run and I am pain-free. And like, I feel what the human body can do is phenomenal. I think that when we give ourselves the right environment, and what I love as well, and what a lot of people probably aren't expecting until they get the book, is the kind of first third is kind of really setting yourself up for success. So like, thank you for including myself and Jared Tavasolian and our kind of approach to movement snacks, which is one of when you give yourself movement that makes your body feel safe, it's really happy to do more. Like you'll extend your range of motion, you'll get stronger. And to be 360 degrees strong means you've got to do different things in different ways and move more differently, very much in a line with, natural born heroes, be the happy generalist. And what I love is that you kind of, you go back to this, there's this evolutionary mismatch. Yay! Movement snacks. So this evolutionary mismatch about exercise that, our brain and our bodies are kind of out of sync in how they operate. So do you want to talk? I had like some other questions, but do you want to, because I love that. I love that. And I love kind of talking about that, but I want to hear your thoughts.
I realize I hijacked your brain by showing you the movement snacks image, but you can see where in the book movement snacks is just from it's a little bit blurry.
Yeah.
See how early in the book it is? And it's funny, we moved it several times. So originally it was going to be right before the 90-day program at the end of the book. Like, you've learned all these things, and oh, by the way, here are some warm-up movements. And then we were going to move it into the middle where we have our fitness section. And then Eric and I realized, actually, this is step one. Like, literally physically step one should be the movement snacks. Reintroduce people to getting the blood flowing, getting their range of motion before they do anything else. It's almost what you do. And this is what the reason why I wanted movement snacks in the first place was the first time I went to a parkour training session. It was with Shirley's women's group, and they all formed in a circle and they did this quadrupedal movement, this kind of bear walk into the center and they shook hands and they bear walk backwards again. I'm like, A, what is this? And B, this is amazing because you stand up, it's fun, it's challenging, everyone's kind of having a good time, but you stand up and everything from your ear lobes down to your toes is now been extended and stretched, but in a almost unconscious way. Like, oh, I stretch, I didn't realize I was stretching. Let's do that again. You know, like you do it twice, you want to do it 3 times. It's the kind of movement that leaves you feeling like, oh, I want to do this all day. It's hard but fun. And so I thought, that's it. Like if everybody begins to run that way, and that's what we would do. So we would do on books, or when we would do these group runs, we would get a running club together and we'd have them do this. And people are like, what? And they're confused by it. And then they did, and they stand like, oh my God, that's so cool. So that's what we wanted to do. That. So movement snacks to me was giving the range of motion and the warm up that every runner feels they need, but don't know how to do it. That's it. Like this is it. And I think that to me, that was the important thing. Was I wanted everybody's first couple of steps into the ocean of this experience to be gentle, fun, and encouraging them to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And for me, that's the whole, and with Jared as well, with the kind of coaching we do with clients, it's always just like, it's baby steps. And it's like, you know, you're not going to go out and become a big wave ride surfer and until you can swim, until you can hold your breath, until you're kind of good at paddling. So like movement begets more movement, but not all movements are equal. And there are these kind of gateway moves that tell where you'll get your own body's feedback on what am I ready for today? What is the energy and how does my body feel today? And I love that there's so much in the book that just refers and invites people to just listen to their bodies. Like I'm very happy to kind of experiment with tech things for like 2 weeks. And then I'm like, I'm done. I need full autonomy. I need just to, in the same way, you know, like if I say to you, how far did you run or how long, you're like, I don't know. And when I went through a kind of running project for a year, I trained for a race that I'll never do because I'm not into the races and the big people and the corrals and all that stuff. But I did the training and you know, you think like, okay, I have to have my music and my playlist. And it's like, no, like even when people tell me they go for a walk and listen to a podcast, I'm like, oh, you're missing so much out on just walking. And the stories of life are happening all around us, of the air and the temperature and the body. And so for me, movement snacks are just this amazing feedback tool that invite you in. Like, how are you breathing? Where's your nervous system at? Are you running from cool, relaxed, alert, rest and digest? Or I'm running from the lion, but that's only going to be short-lived and it's going to be a short burst. Are you connected? Like I've had movement people who they've come to me and I'm always like, really? Why do you want me to be your movement coach? Like you're amazing at movement, or like you've been doing movement or this thing for like 30 years. And then after a month of training, they'll be like, Julie, my body has never, ever felt so connected. And this connection, and, you know, I didn't invent anything or make up anything. I observed the parkour world for 15 years. And then having someone like Jared, who has his own individual exploratory movement world mixed in with being a health coach, applied kinesiologist and nutritionist, was like, okay, so the conversations we had, but then movement snacks was kind of born from that. So I also love that you have movement snacks, then you have food.
You know, I think you touched on an earlier point about the evolutionary model. And when you look at movement, running, food, so much of what we do has been dictated by the stresses of the modern world, about the fact that our exercise is 45 minutes. We got to do it all. We got to warm up. We got to stress ourselves. We got to warm down. We got to change. We got to get back to the desk. 45 minutes. And same with food. Hey, you know what? We all know really by this point what to eat or not eat. It's not a mystery. When you sit down at the table, you got a bowl of pasta, you realize, this is a bad idea. You should have about a fistful of protein and a lot of vegetables. As Michael Pollan said, eat real food, mostly vegetables, not too much. 9 words, everything you need to know about eating. In 9 words, there's no mystery there. But the fact of the matter is, I got this Zoom call I got to do. Oh, my kid's got a soccer game. I got to grab something as I'm running out the door. What's wrapped in plastic that's in the fridge I can take with me? What's at the 7-Eleven? I'll make the least evil choice at the 7-Eleven. And so the difficulty we find ourselves in is that we have the knowledge, we don't have the time. Or we have the misconception that we need to be constantly performance-based. And so I think what we were aiming at in looking at movement snacks and then food and then fitness and form is, let's revert back to a more evolutionary ancestral model as opposed to the modern performance-oriented, get the most out of your minutes model. So you talked about people going for a walk and listening to a podcast. Eric and I really wrestled with the question of running with music, because he and I adamantly against it. Like, you are defeating the purpose. The whole idea is listen to your own breathing, listen to the outside world. If something is pumping in your ears, you're not paying attention to what's happening with your ankles. You're not really in tune with the movement of your body. That's our conviction. But at the same time, I'm looking around at other people like, they're pretty goddamn good runners. And they're listening to music.
They're happy.
They're happy. And so that's where we had this conversation in the book, where we talked to Rick Rubin, the music savant, and Flea, and our friend Erin, Lady Southpaw, where we actually had this debate back and forth. And it landed us on, I think, the key message of the book, and this really ties into food, which is what you're doing getting you closer to what you want to experience or not? Yeah. And if it's not, then you got to ask yourself, why are you doing it? So listening to music, is it getting you closer to your goal, which is to actually enjoy running? Or are you using it to distract yourself from this unpleasant experience? Are you using it as a narcotic to numb yourself and get you through this thing? Food, likewise. What is your goal for food? Your goal for food should be, hey, I want to feel good all the time. I want to feel lighter and happier and more awake. Is this food getting me closer to that goal? Or is it numbing me to something that I don't feel like doing? Like, I stress eat in the car. I hate being in the car. To me, the car is akin to waterboarding. And so I will literally hopscotch from fast food to fast food when I'm in the car. I'll go to a Carl's Jr., to a Jack in the Box during the course of a ride. And then I had to realize, and I had to understand, wait, you know what? I'm finishing the ride thinking I was like sedating myself. I feel worse. I feel bloated and sluggish, and I don't want to move. I get out of the car feeling worse than when I got into the car. And so I realized the food was taking me away from my goal, which is that as soon as I can get out of this goddamn iron box, I want to go for a run. But now I can't because I'm full of milkshake and burger. That's what we approached with the food section, because what we realized was, unfortunately, so many of us, our movement exercise is tied into our relationship with food. Basically, we started to exercise and move because we wanted to get in shape, or we wanted to be able to eat whatever we wanted to and not pay the consequences, or we wanted to lose a few pounds. And to us, like, that is a constant hamster wheel that you will never get off of. If you are exercising because you feel that you need to lose some weight, but then you finish the exercise feeling hungry, so you go back to the same eating habits, you're never going to outrun those empty calories. And so what we were hoping to teach people are these very easy feeling-based techniques that can dial in your eating first. So now food's off the table. You don't have to worry about that. Now you can actually enjoy the movements.
Yeah. I mean, I think I always say to people, if I start working with a client and they'll say like, oh, well, I'm, but I eat really healthy. And I say, okay, great. But what does that mean for each person? Can look very, very different. And so what really matters is then the follow-up question, which is like, well, how's that working out for you? Like, is it working?
Is it working?
Is it working? If you're not sleeping through the night, you have injuries that don't heal, you feel bloated, you feel heavy in your body, you're exhausted after you train, you can't have sustainability or continuity in your training. You're like, is your hair falling out and do you have brittle nails, or how are you prematurely aging? Are you, we can all have an idea of like, well, on a scale of like 1 to 5 on each of those things, like, where is it going well and where is where are you struggling? So, you can look at a lot of people and go, well, yeah, obviously it can look like it's working really well. And whereas, I'd say a lot of the people that Jared works with in getting them out of pain, they're a lot of really elite athletes, because, and it's strange for a lot of people to hear that sometimes athletes are the least healthy people.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're around a lot of athletes, you start to see it and you go like, oh God, yeah, they are.
I was a competitive rower in college, and only about a year after I stopped rowing did I start to feel healthy again. Because
Yeah.
we were rowing 365 days a year, training hard, and you didn't realize you're always on the brink of breakdown, and then you stop for a
and
year.
Then you do.
Yeah, or you do. But then you start to heal and then move in a more natural, less, you're constantly, the car is constantly in the red zone.
Yeah.
And then you dial it back a little bit, you throttle down, and suddenly you start to feel better.
Yeah. So all about kind of finding balance. So I know with writing a book or doing any big project that it expands and then it has to scale down. So what isn't in the book that you would have loved to have been in the book?
Oh no, this is the opposite.
Really?
This one scaled up in
Amazing.
ways that so we lucked out. So when I was supposed to be writing another book. I had contracted to write a book called King of the Weekend Warriors, and it was exactly the shrieky, lectury, shouty book that
Don't do a shouty book.
you would have hated. And the reason why is because there have been so many of these, you got to be tough, the David Goggins kind of tough kind of stuff, books out there. I wanted to write the opposite. I wanted to write about people that just like have a good time, and they're high performing athletes, but they're just doing it for fun. And it's like the weird, quirky challenge of it all. So that's the book I started to write. But halfway through it, I started to realize, oh, I'm not sharing an adventure. I'm trying to win an argument. I'm shouting back, and it just didn't feel good. Like my heart wasn't in it. And that's when I reverted. I thought, let's do something else. Let's do something that's more about making people feel good and enjoying it. And so I knew I'd be working with Eric, and that we'd be moving through the things we thought were integral, what we call the free 7, which is food, form, fitness, fun, family, footwear, and focus. Those 7 things, which you combine them all, you're good to go through life. But what happened was my US publisher was still really on board with the King of the Weekend Warriors book. And they're like, we're not interested in this Born to Run 2 stuff. And so we reached out to our UK publisher, Profile. And Profile's like, sounds fantastic. And then they gave me an editor I'd never worked with before, a woman named Cindy Chan. And she specializes in these kind of books. She'll do like cookbooks or books which are illustrative and kind of how-to-ish, as opposed to the typical like narrative that I usually do. So she's unbelievable. Like this book, I'd give her like 30%, maybe 40% credit for it, all of it, like the ideas, the presentation, and layout, because she would offer good ideas or guide us. But on top of that, I was constantly like last seconding her, like the book is supposed to be locked. And like, Cindy, I found this picture. She's like, fine, Cindy, we got to put in movement snacks in the front, not the back. She's like, fine. And to the point where I could not believe, here's an example. So we have a friend who adopted a girl from China named Stella. Stella has had a lot of physical and transitional challenges through her life. And the one thing she's kind of good at and really takes pride in is her running. And she's young. She's still in high school. So we were doing a little photo shoot one day. And I said to my friend, Jen, hey, bring Stella by and let's see if we take a couple pictures of her. The book is done. It is heading to the printer. I like the pictures of Stella so much. I sent these pictures to Cindy. Said, hey, is there any way we can add these pictures of Stella? And Cindy goes, is there a compelling reason why?
She's quietly just going, Chris, stop.
Yeah. And my only response to her was, I don't know. I think it would send Stella over the moon. She doesn't know who the hell Stella is. And then she didn't tell me what she was going to do. When she sent me the PDF of the draft, she'd added these 3 pictures to Stella at the end, including there's this whole panorama of all the participants in the book, and she put Stella dead center. And I look back on this, like, this Cindy Chan, and she figured out, like, I don't know what the fuck Chris is up to, but somehow
let's run with it.
This is important. So things like that. So this is a book where actually there was nothing left off the table. Like, there's something that should have been off the table. It's in there anyway. Every impulse, every weird story. Our friend Jordan Marie Daniel, who's a Native American runner, I saw a picture of her that I really liked. And I thought, I want this picture in the book. So I called Jordan and said, hey, Jordan, what's this picture of you running with this red hand?
Oh, with the red hand paint. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted the picture. Yeah. Then she tells me the story. I'm like, oh.
And then you're like, oh, yeah. No, it's, I mean, it's moving. Yeah. Like movement moves.
Yeah.
You know.
So this is one where I felt like I had license because of Cindy's like unstoppable adaptability. She probably should have stopped. But everything that occurred to me, every whim, everything that I thought was worthwhile, she found a way to work it into the architecture.
No, I mean, and it's beautiful. It's a really, it's a beautiful book, and like, congratulations with it. I'm still really excited about it. And like you said, it's only kind of been out for a month, which is amazing. I wrote some notes beforehand, so I'm just thinking, like, oh, what are the other things I want to talk to you about? And there's just so much. I mean, I think there's just so much in terms of people finding a movement culture that brings them joy, that movement's kind of for life and it's for everyone. We all have a body. And there's a reason, like, I have a friend who's, she studied social justice and peace and mediation for conflict. And there's a famous peacekeeper called John Lederach. And he's written this, like, the handbook, the Peacekeeper's Pocket Handbook or something. And these are all tactics that come from his work in the middle of conflict zones. And it all comes down, and we became friends because I started talking about parkour, and she was like, it's the same as peacekeeping. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, how, why? And risk, play, curiosity, hope. And we all have a body. And it's the one thing, if you get a group of people in a room, the one thing we all have in common, we have a body that we can move. And we can do it in so many ways.
Queen farts.
Yeah, Queen farts. Pope takes shit. this is my eloquence around discussing movement. So what are you doing for fun right now?
Oh, it's
what aren't you doing that isn't fun?
Yeah. Well, luckily we did move to Hawaii. And what I like is that I can invent any new exercise I want and have a forum here for an arena for it. So there's a thing I love now called the Aquaman, which I called it, and now, like, my kids now call it too. Oh, Dad's off doing an Aquaman. But an Aquaman is, I run down the road about 2 or 3 miles, and I come to a canal. It's about a quarter mile long, so I swim across the canal, and it pops me out on the beach, and then I run 2 miles home. So nice. It becomes like this
run, swim, run.
Yeah, right. It becomes this, what the Swedes are doing, on their frigid islands, I am doing in 85-degree water in the Pacific. But it's cool, and I really look forward to it because, I get to swim and then pop out, and I'm running down the beach, and I'm running on pavement. So it's the variety of it in one run that I like, and I'll do that for 2 or 3 weeks every single day. And then I'm like, yeah, Aquaman, that's boring. And then I'll just be outrigger paddling every day. And like, that sucks. So I just vary it up and just keep moving in a different direction all the time.
I mean, I love it. For me, yeah, I think once you're in a kind of, you live a creative life, you live a curious life, you live a life of adventures, which means you're in a constant state of, like, ooh, what's interesting here? Like, ooh, what's interesting there? Or I can relate to that. So I'm not good with the the fixed and the regimental, and that just doesn't work for me so well.
You know something interesting? I just gave up a movement permanently and stopped doing it entirely.
That's a big decision.
It was a big decision. It actually caused me emotional distress. It was playing basketball. So I had made this decision once before. I was in like my mid-20s, living in Philadelphia, and I was playing, watching the new cat trying to do a movement of its own, like pull out its collar. I was working in one part of the city, and then I would go back to another part of the city, and I was playing pickup ball like 5 nights a week with these buddies, and then going to a bar afterwards, and loved it. And then I got offered this job working as a news correspondent in Portugal. And I was going to turn it down because I thought, I kind of dig it here. I like these pickup games. I thought, dude, you're making career choices based on like evening basketball. Like, what's wrong with you? And so I decided cold turkey. I just stopped playing ball, took the job, and did not play basketball for like 30 years. And then when my oldest daughter was in middle school and she started to play ball, I started to play ball with her, and then got in some pickup games. And then here in Hawaii, there's a Sunday morning pickup game that I loved. It's 7:00 in the morning. And I started going to that game. But then after a couple of years, I realized, you know what? I feel the same way now that I did when I was 15, like the same like anxiety, like I gotta, I'm not playing well enough, and I would come home feeling like kind of shitty or excessively elated about the day. I'm like, man, way too much like my emotion. Hey, so this one's in distress out here. Way too much. I get way too much emotional investment in going to this game. And then I came home one day and told Mika, I said, I'm not going to play anymore. She was kind of shocked by it, but my brain is just too centered on this, way too much. And the roller coaster of like feeling great, feeling shitty, feeling great.
Yeah.
So I decided I'm going to drop that and just do other stuff where I'm always not emotionally attached and just enjoying it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big decision, because it's obviously something that did bring you huge joy, but you had a very like codependent relationship with basketball.
Exactly the perfect word, codependent. Yeah.
So, well, I hope you're enjoying all your other fun stuff, which I know you are. I mean, I have friends who I even call fun coaches. Like, I have 2 friends in particular, and I'm like, no, 3, who I'm always like, hey, you're my fun coach. Like, what are we doing right now? Like, what are we doing? Let's go on an adventure. Let's go to Baja. Let's do this. Let's hike. Let's like, I just discovered this hike in Palm Springs, which is the cactus to clouds. So so you start in the desert at Palm Springs at the tram airway thing, and the first 10 minutes or I'm getting this really wrong now. The first section, in a very, very short time, you have a very high elevation. And then you basically get up to the national park at the top where there's snow.
Ooh.
It takes about 12 hours to hike.
Oh, never mind.
And then if you choose, what's great is there's a tram that you can then take all the way back down the mountain.
I like that.
So cactus to cloud. So you start hot, sunny desert, end up snowy mountain. So
Are they installing a water slide anytime soon?
There's always opportunities.
So is this open to anybody? Like, do you have to like reserve it or anything? Or can you just show up?
Public trail.
Just go for it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks beautiful. It looks really, really beautiful. So that's a kind of, it's nice to have projects as well as just like, oh, I'm spending time on the floor, rolling around, doing movement snacks, doing parkour, surfing, enjoying like having a set of rings outside, doing that. Yeah, it's always a lot of walking with packs. Like when people tell me they don't walk, I immediately go like, doesn't have a dog.
Right.
No dog. Like, what a loss. Like, or no animals. What a loss. Like, are you not up and outside in the morning? What a loss. Right. I always feel bad for those people.
Yeah.
And you've just started, you've taken in a cat. This is how it starts, Chris.
Yeah. Well, luckily,
there's a pattern here.
Luckily, the cats are self-reliant. Like, we got a cat door, like they come and go on their own. But I feel that sense of loss for them, because even when we were discussing this yesterday, I was saying, hey, you said, what's your time like? I said, after 90 minutes, I'm going to start like looking
Yeah,
around.
we've done well. We've done like an hour and 45. We're
That-
good.
It's like my body chemistry is that after 90
Yeah.
minutes, I better run around or I'm going to start like
Yeah.
misbehaving.
Yeah. Well, it's been great. I want you to go misbehave somewhere and have fun. And everyone should get Born to Run too. And they should also get Running with Sherman. And they should also get Natural Born Heroes. And they should also get Born to Run, because I love that your words are out there in the world, and that you are the storyteller who can go and find these interesting, curious people. And there's the rebels and the runners. And I just really like the eccentric mavericks and their stories. And I like to hear more of them because they make me feel good in the world. And I'm happy they're in the world.
Yeah, you saw it with the Santa Mujeres. You came to run with them. You thought this is a gang of weirdos, but man, they're fun.
Love it.
Yeah.
The Born to Run Festival. What a wild and wonderful
What a band of
event.
weirdos, right?
It's all good stuff. So any final thoughts, final messages, other than go find all your books?
I have a question. Are you going to do that Cactus to Cloud thing anytime soon?
Yeah. I'm looking at doing it in the spring with Jared and my friend Rodrigo. Yeah.
When in the spring? March.
Why are you heading over?
Well,
Come
I
play.
am going to be in Santa Barbara for the Santa Barbara 9 Trail.
Oh yeah, that's April. Yeah.
Lewis and Barefoot Ted are doing it. So
I mean, it's only a couple hours down to Palm Springs. 3
I
hours
know,
maybe.
I have a feeling this Santa Barbara thing is gonna lay me out. So
Or maybe do it first. This is going to be literally a walk in the park.
yeah.
Steep walk, but it's a walk, not a run.
I know. I'm a little concerned with this 9 trails thingy. It's you read the description, it sounds kind of brutal. I'm gonna give myself a nice long runway to get ready for it, but I have a feeling like don't underestimate it. You better show up and be ready to go.
But here's the thing: you're going to look at Cactus to Clouds, and you're going to be like, "Oh, that looks really beautiful." And
I'll tell you what looks really beautiful.
Oh, here's the rescue kitty.
Oh, hey, so we're struggling with the name, Jules. Anything spring to mind?
Oh no.
Yeah.
I'll go for a walk and come up with something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm holding out for a scrapple, which is a Pennsylvania Amish food, but I'm not getting any takers on scrapple.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll get back to you on that. So thank you so much for your time today and all your work, and always fun to talk to you and find out. So big hugs to you and to Mika and the girls. And I'll keep you posted on everything that's happening and everything.
I'll let you know if I reconsider Cactus to Clouds.
Cactus to Clouds. Join us. You're gonna.
Jules.
Yay. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.